Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda Suggett, and I'm the Executive Director of CARSP. We're just first of all going to wait a few seconds for others to join, so we'll be starting shortly. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll get started. Once again, everyone, my name is Brenda Suggett, and I'm the Executive Director of CARSP, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Traffic Calming on Arterials, Why It Matters and How to Do It. And we're joined by Matt Pinder, who's the Senior Mobility Consultant with Mobicon, and I'll be introducing him in a moment. But first of all, I just want to remind everyone that with CARSP, as part of your membership, you do receive access to webinars free throughout the year, and we do them monthly. And we also have recordings as well. So you get access to those recordings right away. And also, just to make you aware that we do have an upcoming webinar, and it's called Leaders Cross-Sector Perspectives on Road Safety. And I'm just going to read a short description of it. It says, join us for a panel style webinar hosted by the leaders in Road Safety Group. It's a network dedicated to supporting and elevating women and allies within Canada's road safety industry. And this session will have four accomplished women from diverse sectors who will be speaking, and they are Pam Fasili, Dr. From Parachute, Dr. Linda Rothman from TMU, Jenny Bahar from Navigats, and also Brenda Biscelli from the city of Vaughan. So join us for that. It's going to be on March 10th, and you can register today. That information is on our website. Now for some housekeeping. So we do question and answers as part of the webinar, but we do that at the very end. But we do ask that you, or I should say, we do let you know that you can actually enter those questions at any time into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the webinar. But again, they won't be answered until the end. Also, we do post our webinars shortly after the webinar occurs. And we also are trying to post the slides. So we are asking each speaker, and Matt has agreed that we can post his slides, so they will be posted as well. And I just want to encourage you to share. The most current webinar is only available to members or those who pay the $50 fee. But past webinars, the ones previous, or I should say, yeah, before the most current one, are available to the public. So we encourage you to share that with other people. And also, I wanted to make you aware that we have a post-webinar survey, and you have a chance to win a $25 Tim's gift card. And in this survey, we're just trying to gather information on some feedback that would help the presenter, any that, said that what they did well or where, areas for improvement, but also ideas for future webinars. So we encourage you to fill that out. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Matt Pinder. So, Matt is an engineer with Mobicon, and he's applying Dutch-inspired principles to reimagine streets and transportation systems. He's passionate about creating communities where car ownership is an option, not a necessity. So, thank you so much for joining us today, Matt, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Brenda. And I'm really happy to be here today presenting on a topic that is quite dear to me. And I'm hoping that by the end of this webinar, I'll have many of you thinking differently about speed and how to manage it with some new tools for your toolboxes. A little bit about me. I consider myself a Dutch-inspired engineer, but I have been working in Canada for 10 years, working on active transportation, complete streets, getting a little bit into civil engineering and transportation planning. I take pride in that I really enjoy delivering trainings and presentations and workshops, and I've trained over 1,000 professionals in Canada on multimodal transportation planning and design. And fun fact about me, I love taking pictures of street components while traveling, and I've gotten pretty good at it while cycling, while in motion. A little bit about Mobicon. We are a Dutch-based company with our North American office in Ottawa. That's where I am. And everything we do is about making the world less dependent on the car. So you think of the Dutch and you think probably about cycling and Amsterdam, but we're really trying to create more multimodal transportation systems, and bikes are just one piece of that. This is what I'm going to take you through over the next roughly half an hour. And then I really look forward to answering some questions and having a discussion about some of this after. Um, First, I'm going to talk about how low speeds really support great places and how we should be thinking of that first and foremost when we're talking about speed. How the next thing we need to do is build good roads and streets in order to support those places. A Dutch principle called driving slower is faster, another Dutch principle called wide nodes and narrow roads, and then a little bit of a rundown of some of my favorite arterial speed management techniques with some Canadian examples. And then last discussion on transitions, urban to rural, other types of context changes along streets. So the first thing that I want you to take away from this presentation is the link between speed and place. There's two things that our streets and our public realms need to do in our cities. One is move people. That's pretty clear. As a transportation practitioner, I'm pretty familiar with this one. It's essential for our activities, our economy, our services, our goods, and for us to get to work and everywhere else we need to go. The important thing is, though, when there's a lot of movement happening in a place, it can diminish the quality of that place. And we're going to dig into that in a little bit. But here's an example of a really well-designed movement corridor. You can see it's wide, it's open, it's pretty easy to drive along, and you can imagine someone driving at a reasonably fast speed there. Place, on the other hand, these are the really vibrant places where you want people to be out in the street, talking to each other, socializing. This is a pedestrian street in Ottawa, but on streets with cars, of course, these activities happen as well. And movement in place is a framework developed in Australia that has really helped guide their safety programs and a lot of how they build their community design. And they basically assert that there are four types of streets or street environments. The local streets, we're all pretty familiar with those. Civic spaces, these are pretty unique streets that, similar to that Spark Street example before, are really high focus on placemaking. But then when we talk about arterials, there's two types. There's main roads. These are those simple environments that are connecting people across places. And there's main streets, and these are the ones that have to move some people and quite a bit of cars, but also are trying to be these vibrant commercial hubs in our communities. Some quick examples of main roads. You can see a nice simple driving environment. There's usually a lot of lanes. It's not going to be a pleasant place to be outside of a car, but because of the way the land use is designed, you're not going to be spending a lot of time outside of a car there. And these are essential for our communities, but they need to be carefully managed because they can sever communities and they can cause, there's been a lot of historical challenges created by highways in Canadian communities. Main streets, you can see, look very different. They are trying to balance moving people in and around the area, but also creating wide, generous public realms with boulevards and patios and streetscaping and trees. Really important places for people to be able to walk and cycle easily. A safe, low-speed environment is essential here. And there's different ways to design them depending on the suburban or urban context that need to prioritize different modes of travel. And this is where speed really comes into play. In Australia, they've just published some research, an economic study looking at how speed relates to the economy of an area. And they have basically found that reducing the speed limit from 50 to 30 kilometers an hour on any street that's important for pedestrians, so think of your town's main street or any commercial corridor, the benefits significantly outweigh the costs. So benefits in terms of easier to cross the street so people can shop more. improved amenities so people will mo walk more and more customers will visit these businesses. And then, of course, the safety angle, but that's actually a pretty small piece of the puzzle. You can see on the graph on the right. So first and foremost, when we're thinking about speed, we want to manage it in the right places, and there's some absolutely essential places to manage speed. This is how the Dutch divide up their urban roads. They have a pretty principled approach to it, and it works quite well for them. They have the lowest speed category of streets called access streets. Because speeds are very low, these are usually the best places. There's often main streets in old towns that they're wider than this, but they're still following that 30 kilometer an hour paradigm. And car traffic noise is very minimal. It's very easy to cross the street. These are wonderful places. The Dutch still have distributor roads. These are what we might call arterials. These are okay places, but you can start to see how traffic dominates the environment. And then the Dutch build a lot of roads through traffic corridors where there's really no desire to make any kind of place quality there. So the next logical step, now that we've talked about the influence of speed on quality places, is where do we want speed to be? Where do we want to encourage speed, and where do we want to carefully manage it? This graph is called the Staircase of Monderman. It's pretty formative in how the Dutch design their communities, and it's based on human psychology. It basically asserts that drivers have a certain tolerance for different speed levels before they start to become impatient. So imagine you're starting a trip from your house and you're just driving on the streets in your community. The Dutch principle is that people are willing to tolerate about 6 minutes at 30 kilometers an hour before they start to get impatient and they want to be on a higher order road. So after those 6 minutes, someone's willing to tolerate a faster road, like an arterial or a Dutch distributor, for about 9 minutes. And within 15 minutes, you want to have your drivers on a high-speed corridor, generally a freeway, but it could also be a well-designed road. And you can try to relate this into your own driving experience. Many Canadians live within probably a 15-minute drive of a freeway, and those are the corridors that we're using to travel longer distances. And when we relate this to our street designs, that first 6 minutes is usually on local and collector streets. The next 9 minutes is on minor arterials, and then the longer trips are what we would call major arterials and highways. And just to put some time perspective to that on the Dutch framework, that's about 3 kilometers that someone would be willing to travel in that 30-kilometer zone. So actually quite a significant distance if you put that into the scale of your neighborhood. Another 7.5 kilometers on a distributor road. And so basically everybody should be within 10 kilometers of a well-designed road that can connect to the broader mobility driving network. So a good road, we need to build lots of these, or we need to build them right. A good, well-designed road prioritizes movement functions. It's great for goods movement. These are locations where we might build grade-separated crossings for pedestrians and cyclists, or grade-separated interchanges, like on our freeway highways. And it's really important that there's no land use along these corridors, there's no driveways, they're a very simple, well-designed environment. And what I would call this in the speed management framework is these are safe places to speed. We have created well-designed highways where people can travel at speed without a lot of negative consequence. And our geometric design guidance for engineering has been focused on how to build great roads for many, many years. We know that we want straight roads, good alignments with super elevation, and that the lack of any of these can cause challenges. But importantly, this is the design language for how we design roads. We also need to be able to design good streets, and this is where speed management is really critical and really where the focus of this presentation goes. So on good streets, we're trying to access destinations. Low speeds are essential. We want the street to be narrow and easy to cross. It's actually good if people are crossing mid-block because we've given them a safe environment to do it. On-street parking is an indication that people are trying to get to places here and want to stay. Complexity, we want the environment to look not like a highway. And this is where instead of a good place for speeds, it's a critical place to manage speeds. I really like this framework from the Global Designing Cities Initiative on what speed is appropriate based on the context. And they've basically asserted that in urban areas, 30 kilometers an hour should be the target speed, and only in certain circumstances should you be able to go above 30 kilometers an hour. And it's really a product of how many people are trying to cross the street, how complex is the street environment, and have you provided separated facilities for everybody. So here's an example, Bank Street in Ottawa, a high activity commercial corridor with lots of people crossing the street and no dedicated bike facilities. Uh, 30 kilometers an hour would be the safe speed for this corridor. Another example from Ottawa, Main Street, where all users are separated. There's a cycle track here, a sidewalk and driving area, and a little bit less crossing demand. 40 or in some exceptions, 50 kilometers an hour would be safe here. You can see these environments are entirely different from roads. Unfortunately, we have built a lot of these roads that are designed like a road, but they have land use and activity like a street. It's wide, straight, and flat, but it also has apartment towers, lots of driveways, lots of commercial, lots of land use. And this environment is especially unsafe, and there's been a lot of academic research that shows that these are where pedestrian fatalities are often the highest. High speeds, high conflict potential, these are combining to create really unsafe environments. And ideally, at the planning level, we would be avoiding this type of design. If you've ever heard the term strode, this is the type of street I'm describing. It's trying to be both a street and a road. There are solutions to pick one or the other, and there's examples in the Canadian context of communities that are actively trying to avoid building this type and focus on the other two. If you're trying to build a street, you're trying to slow traffic, you're trying to be multimodal, you're trying to focus on having buildings along the street and creating complex environments. And this is the focus of the presentation today. Of course, if you're trying to build a good road environment, you should be limiting access. Your official plan or your land use plan should not actually be calling for development abutting corridors like this. Um, and you want to have a simple, clean driving environment. And here's visually another contrast of these two types of environments. A good street is complex. It requires a lot of attention from drivers. It demands their attention so that they're going to operate safely in this very multimodal environment. A good road demands a lot less of drivers so that they can more easily process all that information traveling at a high speed. So this is the English translation of a Dutch principle called driving slower is faster. What do I mean by this? Well, um, the Dutch have really focused on creating good streets where traffic flows at a steady rate, but at a slow speed. So instead of arterials like shopping streets that are posted 50 kilometers an hour in Canadian communities, where you speed up to 50, you slow down for a red light. You speed up to 50, you slow down for a red light. The Dutch have tried to design steady 30-kilometer an hour or 40-kilometer an hour corridors where you're barely speeding up or slowing down, you're just going at a constant speed. And this is one of the common street designs that they use to achieve this. We're calling it a Dutch boulevard today. It is a street for moving cars, but at an appropriate speed, 30 to 50 kilometers an hour. The design means that with a median in the middle, there's no overtaking possible, no passing. The median strip is a great place for planting and for turn lanes where needed. At intersections, speeds are especially managed, and pedestrians and cyclists are, of course, given their own facilities. And now, before you go and think that this is a Dutch thing, we have winter, we have other challenges here. This street type has been built in North America. Carmel, Indiana is actually an interesting leader in experimenting with this type. Their transportation master plan includes this as one of their major arterial street classifications. One lane in each direction with a median of trees, takes up roughly the same cross section as a 5-lane arterial, but you have so much more space for other functions, and you can still have the important space that's needed for a car to pull over, for an ambulance or a fire truck to pass, for example. And from a traffic volume perspective, we tend to think 4 lanes is better than two. But when these are well designed, they can easily carry 15,000 cars a day. and possible up to 25,000 cars a day. And there's very few roads in our communities that exceed that traffic volume, especially the mid to small sized communities. Here's another example from the same city, a 5-lane arterial before. You can see it's not probably a pleasant place to be. I don't see anything going on there, but then they retrofitted the street. So the boulevard was widened, parking was added, 1 lane in each direction. Because there's a fire station right there on this corner, they created a mountable median, so fire trucks can easily get in and out and respond to calls. And part of the road cross section was reallocated to a bike facility there too. So this idea of the North American street where you speed up to 50, you slow down to a red light, speed up to 50, slow down to a red light. 50, I guess if we're achieving speed management well, but maybe it's often 60 or 70. This really comes down to intersection design, and the Dutch philosophy is different here. If we have decided at the planning level that we're building a 4-lane road, 2 lanes in each direction, when that intersects another street, we have a limited number of choices. We can leave it unsignalized and create a dangerous situation where cars are driving out of this side street with a stop sign. We can create a multi-lane roundabout, which takes up a lot of space and has some of its own challenges, or more often than not, we're going to add a traffic signal here. And that's expensive infrastructure. And as soon as you add a traffic signal, you're adding delay and you're limiting capacity of this nice wide 4-lane road that you've built. For the same intersection, but with a 2-lane arterial, you have a few more options. You can still do a traffic signal, but um, excuse me, a stop-controlled side street solution, like the example on the right here, is a lot more palatable, a lot safer. Drivers can turn left out of here with a lot less conflict to manage. If you build a roundabout in a situation like this, it's going to be single lane, and that's going to function a lot safer for all users. And you can easily even just do a pedestrian crosswalk, for example, on the left side of this intersection. Now, this is very common in the Netherlands, but we have built stuff like this in North America. This is an example from New Haven, Connecticut, where it's one of those major road crossing a minor road intersection. And the status quo approach that anyone would think to do here would be build a traffic light. We have people who need to cross the street. We have cars that need to get out of this side street. But that would have either required widening the intersection, perhaps, because this is a busy road, or it would have taken a lot of capacity out of that 1 lane in each direction road. So instead, they tried a speed management technique of a raised intersection. Really, even if people are driving 50 or 60 approaching the intersection, its design means you're slowing down to 30 or 40. That's going to manage conflicts. It's going to make it easier to merge into traffic. And lo and behold, a few years after this intervention was introduced, injury crashes were down 82% here. Now, that's important to reflect on because traffic signals manage conflicts, but they aren't necessarily a safety tool. This was a road safety first approach that helped manage conflicts, but really delivered positive outcomes. And again, here's, like I said, this is a pretty common principle in the Netherlands to design intersections like this. Here's a pretty typical one where you have a main road going east-west, left-right across the screen. You've got bicycle crossings provided. You've got a pedestrian crossing, the zebra crosswalk on the left side. The lanes are narrow, so people are flowing in cars, but at lower speeds. There's a context change at the intersection. It turns from asphalt to red surface, so drivers know that they're entering a conflict area. There's a raised crossing on this side of the intersection, but this is a high capacity intersection. We might look at this and say, oh, this would be fine for a minor collector road, but this is a corridor carrying almost 20,000 cars a day. The last thing to reflect on with this um, with this slower is faster mentality is the crossability. We want to design streets, especially streets in high activity areas where people can easily cross. And we often undervalue this decision when we're making decisions about whether the street should be 2 or 4 lanes. We undervalue what it means for pedestrians crossing the street. It is by far much, much easier for someone to cross a 2-lane road than a 4-lane one, regardless of age, regardless of ability, and regardless of speed. But then when you make a choice to make a road multi-lane, you are going to induce higher speeds, and that's going to worsen overall safety. And finally, if you are trying to provide a crossing for people, it is much easier to provide one across a two-lane road. We have more tools in the toolbox. It is possible to design a safe, uncontrolled crossing across a two-lane road or a pedestrian crosswalk slash PXO. But across a four-lane road, those tools become unavailable, and you end up in situations like this where you've maybe provided the minimum 200 meters between a traffic signal and another traffic signal, but the pedestrian desire line is right in the middle of that, and you have people crossing dangerously mid-block. So this leads into another Dutch design principle of wide nodes and narrow roads. And this is the idea that you should provide car capacity, but only at the locations that need it the most. This is pretty status quo street design for North America, where we design a four-lane road. We decide at the transportation master plan level, this corridor needs to be four lanes for uh, X number of vehicles per hour, and then we start adding intersections along it. Sometimes as close as 150 to 200 meters apart. Sometimes we get spacing of 400 meters, usually not greater than that in our most dense urban and suburban areas. And what this means is that eventually we'll have large intersections where our four-lane road is intersecting another big road, but all those minor intersections along the way are going to have a lot of excess capacity. We'll right size our intersection at the big one, and then we'll have level of service A in between. And this means a lot of extra green time and a lot of speeding opportunities. What the Dutch do is this wide node, narrow road philosophy. This big intersection is where we need the capacity and where we've provided it with four lanes of travel. On the minor street intersections, the approach taken is to provide only the capacity needed. So let's say one lane in each direction gives us the same level of car service along the whole corridor. We've matched demand to capacity. We've used single lane travel in each direction to enforce a good speed limit. But then also what we've unlocked when we do one lane in each direction is the option to do different types of intersections. We don't have to do traffic signals at all these intersections. There's other safe intersection types possible, like the one I showed from Connecticut, or other roundabouts, PXOs, pedestrian crosswalks. And this is pretty commonly applied in the Netherlands, where you'll see a lot of single lane road, one lane in each direction, where there's no need for greater capacity. But when you reach something like a highway interchange where there is a lot of car capacity needed, they will widen that intersection right out. They'll provide all the turn lanes, extra through lanes, and make sure that capacity matches demand. Here's a Canadian example. You'll see a lot of Ottawa examples here because, of course, this is where I live. This is a suburban road that's in Ottawa's transportation master plan. It's a single lane roundabout corridor, one lane in each direction. It looks like this. Ottawa's transportation master plan says that for a budget of $30 million, this corridor should be widened to two lanes in each direction. So widened to four lanes. You can see they've reserved that land in the right of way here. But when you think about this through the wide node, narrow road philosophy, all the intersection or all the congestion is only occurring at a single intersection here. These minor street intersections, they're operating just fine. And really, you just need to widen here to provide that extra capacity. And you can continue to have the safety benefits of a single lane in each direction intersection elsewhere. And in this case, a lot of financial savings. So reflecting on this four-lane versus two-lane trade-off, I would encourage all of you to have this discussion more often rather than just assume that when you're doing a transportation master plan, four lanes is better than two, because you give up a lot when you make that decision to widen a road greater. Um, think through it through different questions like which cross section is going to need less traffic signals, which is going to be cheaper to build, which is more crossable for pedestrians, especially if we expect a lot of pedestrian crossings, which gives us more design flexibility. Within the same amount of right-of-way, this option gives us way more opportunities to plant trees, to add on-street parking, other streetscaping, bus stop amenities. Once we widen to four lanes, we have a lot less boulevard space to work with. And finally, relevant to this webinar, which will have less speeding problems. This is going to enforce its speed a lot more than this one. So I'm going to pause. I want to hear a little bit of chatter in the chat on this one. I want to ask the question to everybody listening, a very simple one. Why do you think people speed? And we can come back to this at the end too, but I want to know, why do you think people speed? I'll take a chance to get some water. Mm. And maybe Brenda or Homa, you could just confirm for me. Is everybody able to? Oh, there we go. And I'm interested in this group, especially because you're not just transportation engineers, and that's who I'm used to working with. So people speed because of the perception of getting somewhere faster. They're in a hurry because they can, because the road design gives them encouraging intuition, some kind of an entitlement mentality, the design of the road. They believe there won't be any consequence of it, no ticket, because we've made it comfortable to speed. It's low cost for the speeder. I think that's the no consequence piece again. People speed because they can speed. Feels good to drive fast. Speed culture, intuition. So there's some common themes here. And now road design cannot solve all the reasons why people speed, and it cannot, it's only one piece of that safe system graph where you have safe land use, safe speed, safe road design. But I think everybody's cluing into the fact that a lot of the time speeding happens because the road allows it. If we ignore things like driver culture um, and mentality, a lot of the time it is just possible to speed, therefore people will speed. So what it really comes down to on these important streets that are important for our communities and our places is eliminating chances for people to speed. Uh, Couple key resources I would highly recommend. First one is a study that just came out from TAC, where they looked at the literature and Canadian examples, and they started this discussion of lower speed collector and arterial roads, highlighting some really key gaps in our national road design guidance, where TAC just assumes that you'll never want to build an arterial that's slower than 50 kilometers an hour and really opens the door to designing 30-kilometer an hour and 40-kilometer an hour streets, which are essential for safety in our communities, in complement to those well-designed roads, like I said. And then another great toolbox of solutions, this one's free. It's called Designing for Safe Speeds from the Global Designing Cities Initiative, a super visual guide that I really enjoyed reading through. Now let's imagine you're the transportation engineer or the street designer who's tasked with managing speeds on a street. The four key design principles I would emphasize and close. You want someone who's driving on the street to feel like they're in a tight space. That's going to psychologically encourage them to drive slower, very different from a big wide open road. You want to engage the drivers. You want to give them things to look at, um, like signs, streetscaping, parked cars, there could be a car door opening at any moment. So someone's going to be pretty engaged in looking at that area and being careful around it. Deflect. This is going lateral deflection, left, right, or up, down with vertical deflection. And then finally, restrain. This is the what just came up in the chat of wanting to limit speeding opportunities. One lane in each direction means even if someone wants to drive really fast here, they are restrained by the person in front of them. And then thinking about along the street, you want to use measures to maintain a certain speed, and that means you have to have frequent measures. You can't just have one speed hump on a 1 kilometer long corridor or one roundabout. Depending on the speed you're trying to achieve, you need to have a certain spacing of measures. So for 50 kilometers an hour, about every 120 meters, you need something that's going to manage your speeds. Now, I've already spoken a lot about this, but I think the single most effective technique we have to manage speeds is to right size our streets. This is usually referred to as road diets, where you take a four-lane road and you take it down to one lane in each direction with some other elements. Importantly, some studies have shown that these are effective on roads up to 28,000 vehicles a day, which is pretty incredible. Some quick decision framework will say 12,000 is the max. So these are worth looking into on our higher volume corridors. And in before after studies, these show a massive drop in collisions, injuries, and deaths, only a minor change in the actual travel speed along a corridor. So you'll cut off the high end speeding, but people will actually still be, again, that slower is faster mentality. And when one of these studies talked to emergency responders, they actually found that there was no change in emergency response rates, even though this is commonly thought of as a challenge for emergency responses. When we think about road diets, it's usually in the context of adding cycling facilities. And I do want to address the elephant in the room, which is a certain bill in Ontario right now. I would actually assert that a road diet or a right-sized street is first and foremost about road safety, and it's less about what you actually do with the extra created space. You could just hatch that out for all I care, and you're going to have a much safer street. And I wouldn't let certain legislation about where you can and can't build bike lanes to be something that limits your ability to use this really important road safety tool. Here's one of my favorite case studies, a very classic four-lane road built with bike lanes in the city of Markham. This is their standard cross-section for a new, I think it's a major collector street, and with a major shopping center on one side and housing on the other, you could see that this became quite a safety challenge for them and a lot of excess road capacity. So a few years ago, they came back and restriped this. They added one lane in each direction, which also unlocked the opportunity to add a new pedestrian crossing here. A pedestrian crossing in the before example would have taken a traffic light. That's expensive infrastructure. It has other consequences. A PXO was way cheaper here, and you can see that this corridor is now one for just the budget of restriping is going to be a much better operating corridor from a speed perspective. Roundabouts, another one of my favorite measures. They force speeds of 30 kilometers an hour if you're designing a single lane one, or 40 kilometers an hour if you're doing a multi-lane one. They really unlock entire different corridors. If you have a lot of land use between two roundabouts, you can use the roundabout to turn around. All of a sudden, you don't need all these left turns and right turns into driveways. You can build continuous center medians and have smooth, continuous flow with one lane in each direction. They can also really function as a gateway feature to enter a community. But importantly, there are competing design philosophies with roundabouts. The Dutch philosophy, and this design on the bottom right from Edmonton reflects that, is to design roundabouts with those crossings as really sensitive places. You want to have drivers going no faster than 30 kilometers an hour at those crossings. On a multi-lane corridor, that's super challenging. You're going to get 40 kilometers an hour at best, and your crossing safety is going to deteriorate really fast. This example from Milton has made the news recently because there's new schools on one side of the road and the community on the other, and a lot of kids crossing here to get to school. Um, I think they've started to add crossing guards here, and it's improved the situation, but I would argue that any multi-lane roundabout with pedestrians crossing it should have raised crossings by default. Narrower lanes, another one of my favorite tools. Uh, it's pretty common to think that wider lanes is a more forgiving design and is safer. I think if you're designing a road, that might actually be true. If you're designing a street with a lot of multimodal activity, a lot of need to manage speeds, you really want to go to the low end of the spectrum. And importantly, the TAC geometric design guidance does give a lot of flexibility here. In Toronto, one of my favorite ones to mention, has their targets that are at the lower end of the TAC design domain. So Toronto will design a 3.3-meter curb lane measured to the face of the gutter or the face of the curb, and a 3-meter inside lane measured to the face of the curb. So 3 meters, 3.3. This is a newly built street with those principles. You can see it is tighter. The cars are closer together, but that's the point. You're adding complexity and you're encouraging slower speeds. Raised crossings, speed tables. Edmonton's become a real leader in this on their collector roads specifically. They have a policy goal of achieving 40 kilometers an hour. That necessitated developing some new standards. They found that the TAC guidance for raised crossings wasn't actually effective in getting speeds down to 40 kilometers an hour. The raised crossings were too light. So they developed their own guidance. They worked with their transit services. They tested it with vehicles. And now they've got a new standard that they have applied to over 100 locations citywide. Relative to the tax standard, Edmonton, for their 40-kilometer speed, is higher and it has steeper ramps, but they're still designed with transit vehicles in mind. Excuse me. One that's pretty common in Australia, or emerging, I would say, is race safety platforms. This is the idea of a speed table, but applied just in advance of an intersection. There's a few examples here. Let's say you have a 60-kilometer-an-hour road. That might be a safe speed to achieve mid-block, but at intersections, you have a lot of conflicting movements. You have a lot of more multimodal activity. Safe systems approach in Australia says you should actually try to slow down drivers at the intersection. So say 60 down to 40, and then let them speed back up to 60 ahead of the intersection. This goes against some of the conventional mentality of the speed should be constant along a corridor, but they've had really good success from a safety perspective with these. They've published a lot of early evidence of success here. So these raised features in advance of the intersection will slow down cars by about 20 kilometers an hour, and that 20 kilometers an hour is huge in its ability to save lives at those important conflict points. Here's a few different speed table profiles for anybody looking for some technical guidance. Edmonton's compared to Waterloo's. The region of Waterloo is piloting this at multi-lane roundabouts. The key innovation here is that the approach ramp is steeper than the departure ramp. You want to control speed here, but you want to manage the impacts to the big vehicles here. So and this is very consistent with how Australia has done this as well. A steep approach ramp, a high platform, and then a gentler departure ramp. These test really well with large vehicles and with buses. Last one, lane shifts and lateral deflection. A good, well-designed road is smooth and straight. A well-designed street is actually going to encourage drivers to move around and engage them as they go along the street. It can be as simple as your intersection taper being steeper than the conventional one. This is a limitation of TAC. They say TAC only provides tapers as low as 8 to 1. That would be the angle of this left turn lane here. But you can see by nature of this angle being sharper, a driver has to swerve as they approach the intersection here, and that's going to control speeds quite well. So Toronto goes as low as 5 to 1 on tapers, and I would encourage this to be used on other 30 and 40-kilometer-an-hour streets in urban areas. Finally, transitions. How do you deal with speed management at important changes in context? This is an example from the town of Wolfville, a draft change to their street network plan. This is a town of about 10,000 people with roads that enter the town from rural areas. So you're going from rural to an urban street. And then those streets enter the town's downtown, which is a vibrant multimodal area. What we've worked with them to help them do is at their policy level, they actually have on their classification map transition zones. These are areas where their policy says we need to do design interventions to signal a significant change in speeds from 60 to 50 entering the town and from 50 to 30 entering the downtown. And these can be any of the measures I've already talked about, but the policy says that where opportunities arise, these measures will be introduced. So in general, any community has transitions from rural to urban, from urban to downtown, or even just entering high sensitive areas like a school zone for a certain distance. Tools for signaling a change in transition. Roundabouts are really good. Here's exiting a town in Ottawa, the town of Richmond. You can see built up area, roundabout, and then into the rural portion of the road. Raised safety platforms are good for this, or any kind of raised feature. Even something so subtle as changing from a double yellow center line to a single yellow center line, I think is a really good indicator of a change in context and is not used enough. And it's a very cheap technique. Okay, so let's wrap up because I'm curious to have people's questions and talk through some of this stuff. In conclusion, if you're looking to manage speed on arterials, it's really important to first look at the network. Pick your really good roads and design those as roads, places where people can safely speed. But in places where there's multimodal activity, where there's livability, where you're trying to intensify and add more people, it's essential to design good streets. And these are very different, almost the opposite of roads, with low speeds to support good, thriving economic places. In those places, one lane per direction should be the target and do whatever you can to get there. One lane in each direction. Widen only at the big intersections. That's the wide node, narrow road mentality. At the street level, when you're trying to manage speeds, focus on enclosing, engaging, deflecting, and restraining, and then focus most on the conflict points and transitions to really signal context changes to drivers. So with that, thank you for your time today. Hopefully I've embedded some new ideas with all of you. I do want to mention on behalf of CARSP, there's a feedback survey that you can fill out there with the QR code or with the link that's at the very top of the chat and a chance to get a gift card. But I'd love to continue this conversation and hear any questions that folks have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt, and appreciate you doing that plug for our post-webinar survey. And yeah, I just want to thank you so much. That was such a great overview of the Dutch sort of method of road safety and the different philosophies that they have, and also touching on the TAC guidelines. So that was great. Thank you for that overview. And also, just a quick little plug for our conference because Matt is also going to be one of the speakers in a panel on speed management in Canada on the second full day of our conference, which is in Halifax from June 14th to the 17th, along with different other people who'll be talking about speed management. So please check that out. And we will be launching the registration and the program this week. So keep looking for that. But back to Matt. So yeah, I do invite you to submit your questions through the Q&A. I do see a couple there, and I see a couple in the chat area too. I'll just start with the ones that are in the Q&A. So first question is, what was the free resource that was listed a few slides ago next to the new TAC resource? I don't know if you can remember that. Okay.
And it's called Designing for Safe Speeds. It's not necessarily super easy to find on Google. I would include Global Designing Cities Initiative in your search, and you will find it. It's free. It's quite a large comprehensive guide with lots of visual examples.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The next one is any thoughts on automatic speed enforcement in order to achieve safety goals with road street redesigns? And as you know, in Ontario, this is a hot topic. But yeah, your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on automatic speed enforcement are that they're essential for when I ask people why people speed, one of the reasons was there's no consequences of speeding. There are significant social consequences of speeding to the people outside of the vehicles and the people in the vehicles. And if there is no penalty for speeding, then of course people aren't going to truly value those social costs of speeding. Speed cameras help put a price on it and show that societally we do care about speed limits. Now, I think I can also empathize why there's been pushback in Ontario because in some cases drivers don't fully appreciate or understand why these were there in the first place. Um, so this is beyond my domain of working with elected officials to understand the politics of this, but um, we should be to the principles of my presentation, we should be agreeing on where speed management matters, where it's the most important. So based on land use, based on where there's a lot of multimodal activity, and focusing there on our speed management and not necessarily just applying this everywhere. I know in the city of Ottawa on a very well-designed road, where it's posted 60 and people drive 80, a speed camera was very unpopular because the street environment is such that it's a road environment and it is a safe place for people to travel at speed. But I would love to have back some of those cameras that were on the more multimodal urban streets that where speeding any increase in speeds is really deadly for pedestrians and other users.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Another question is for two-lane arterials, how important is the median and can they be successful without the median?
This is where figuring out what works for your local context matters. I don't think the median is absolutely essential. The Dutch do it because it gives you more space for trees. It limits passing opportunities. But I've heard other engineers say the way we do underground utilities, the median could be quite challenging for that. So I'd say maybe the more typical Canadian solution would just be a lane in each direction without a median, or with something narrower and mountable, like one of those caramel examples I showed. Let's see, like this one, something that's a bit narrower. Maybe there's trees on it if you can manage them, but it's more of it's a narrower feature that can be mounted by emergency vehicles.
Okay, thank you. So any suggestions for transitions from major arterials into neighborhood streets with homes? I find people doing around 60 kilometers an hour and don't transition to neighborhoods for a couple of blocks. Like they don't reduce their speed for a couple blocks.
Yeah, there is a principle that I can't remember what it's called, but when people have been driving on a highway and they are suddenly on an urban street,
Mhm.
they're mentally still prepared to drive fast. I don't think I have any easy solutions for that other than um, gateway treatments and transition treatments. So a roundabout is really effective for that because you can't travel through a roundabout without slowing down. And then you've been interrupted psychologically and you're driving 30 kilometers an hour at the start of the exit of the roundabout.
Okay, and someone's raised a question about the weather that we get here in Canada, particularly our harsh winters, and how can traffic calming measures be adapted to ensure safety and efficiency in areas with frequent snow, ice, reduced visibility, and so forth. I don't know if you have anything about that.
I would argue that snow is actually one of our best traffic calming assets. You look at the design principles of a managed speed arterial, enclose, engage, deflect, and restrain. Snow certainly encloses the roadway when it's piled up at the edges of the roadway. It's creating a visual barrier and it's making the road seem smaller. It's something that you're looking at, especially when it's snowing. Sometimes, depending on where snow is, you're having to travel in different parts of the roadway. And in certain communities, they'd actually pile it up in the middle of the road, which restrains the roadway itself or narrows the roadway. So, of course, we need to design these features in a way that our winter maintenance folks can manage and maintain them. But I think snow just tells us how tolerant we are, or how we're already quite familiar with what a complex driving environment looks like. A snow-covered arterial is very complex, and people adjust their behavior to that. So why not design complex environments from the beginning? And I mean, the fact that City of Edmonton has built 100 raised crossings tells me that a winter city can certainly do this work.
Right. And one of the participants joked about Toronto using snowbanks to narrow streets. That's one of their strategies.
Yeah,
So,
Ottawa's local and collector streets get about a meter or 3 meters narrower in the winter when the snow starts
oh,
to pile up.
oh my goodness. Yeah, someone raised about distracted driving. He said, from safety perspective, how to prevent distracted driving or driver distraction when designing lane shifts.
I think that's the tension of roads and streets, where um, if you're used to designing roads, you're used to thinking, I need to make a simple environment here, and I need to design an environment that if someone is distracted, that they're not going to hurt themselves or others. When you're designing a street, you're doing the opposite mentality where you're saying, I am intentionally creating a complex environment that demands people's attention so that they will not choose to be distracted and they will be focused on the task of driving. And If you make a mistake at 30 kilometers an hour, you miss your lane taper and you run into the back of someone, nobody's going to get hurt or killed. Um,
Mhm.
so the consequences of someone not following that lane shift are really a lot less than a high-speed collision on a high-speed road.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions, but I do have one myself. You mentioned at different times during your presentation about savings in terms of costs, like if you put in less traffic lights, for instance. And I was just curious if any of the you know, municipalities or jurisdictions you've worked with, if you've ever had to give like kind of a financial case, a business case, to emphasize the savings with your design. I mean, it'll also be safer for people, but has that ever come into play?
I have not personally, but when I review TMPs and I look at the sheer cost of widening roadways, it is incredible. Millions and millions of dollars per kilometer to widen roadways. And uh,
Hmm.
everybody says they're cash strapped right now. So we're either going to widen a lot less of those or we're going to raise taxes. And I would love to be able to
Yeah.
find more creative solutions that involve neither and take money collected from development and taxpayers and use that instead to further safety and livability in our communities.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's great. Yeah, well, I just want to thank you again for your time and for doing this excellent presentation. Any last thoughts that you want to share with us, Matt?
Uh, just that it was a pleasure to present. I'm looking forward to having a similar conversation at the CARSP conference in Halifax and doing
Mhm.
that conversation alongside practitioners of other backgrounds too.
Right. Sounds great. And yeah, just so people are aware, there's going to be someone from the enforcement side. Sorry, just let me see if I can see exactly. Um, Yeah, different perspectives, basically. Another person is going to talk about automated speed enforcement and the research that's been done. So different perspectives of speed management. And as I say, we'll be launching the preliminary program this week, so check that out. And otherwise, yeah, we'll be posting both the recording and the slides of this presentation within the next few days. And we encourage you once again to do the post-webinar survey. So with that, yeah, just thanks so much everybody for joining us. And thanks again, Matt. I really enjoyed your presentation. It was excellent.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take care.